Everybody see the screen okay?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so
That's you recording now.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to start off with just some kind of main facts around the menopause. So what we know is the menopause is a period in a woman's life when their monthly menstrual cycle ceases and levels of estrogen and actually progesterone decline. Okay, so the official kind of definition of the menopause is that when a woman has 12 months without a cycle, because what you're going to see in a minute is that there's a period leading up to that time where the cycle becomes quite erratic. So it's only the official medical kind of definition is it's only whenever they have 12 months solidly without a cycle that they've actually gone through the menopause. However, it's not really one event, it's a process. So it is an important physical and psychological transition that women have historically coped with alone. Okay, and what we also know now is that there's a variety of successful interventions available that support women through this important transition. Okay, so I think those are key messages to get across, that women no longer need to suffer alone and that there are really effective interventions out there now available. So in terms of actually some kind of key facts. So the average age of the menopause is 51 and the average age of the perimenopause is 45. So the perimenopause is the period leading up to the time where a woman's periods will stop. Okay, now that again is the average age, and obviously individual differences vary greatly. What we know is 1 in 100 women start the menopause before 40. I believe that in terms of the perimenopause, we still don't have hugely accurate figures around that, because there's a lot of women who are beginning to experience symptoms of the menopause, but they don't realize that that's what it is, because maybe those symptoms are quite kind of low level, or maybe they are mistaken for impact of work-related stress or just the pressure of modern living. Okay, 1 billion women worldwide are going through the menopause. And I mean, what we know obviously is that the workforce is aging, so this is going to affect more women. There are 42 identified symptoms of the menopause. I think this fact always terrifies people, because it's really important to get across that actually, you would be incredibly unlucky if you were going to experience 42 symptoms, and many women experience 2 or 3 main symptoms. 3 out of 4 women will experience symptoms lasting between 7 to 15 years. So it really is a very significant kind of period in a woman's life. One of the kind of key bits of information that's coming out is that, as you will discover, one of the main psychological symptoms of the menopause is either anxiety or depression. And that many women in their 40s, particularly around that perimenopause age, are often misdiagnosed with depression and given antidepressants, which unfortunately do not have an impact on the depression that comes as a result of the perimenopause or menopause. So this is where the knowledge is power bit comes in. Even that one important fact can be a game changer for women to go back to their GPs and say, do you know what? I've been on these antidepressants for a while. I don't really feel they're making a difference. Actually, could this be more in relation to perimenopause or menopause? And therefore, then the approach is quite different. So I think that's really important. What we often kind of call this is the perfect storm, where it can be a time in life where women have other caring responsibilities and also may have reached a point in their career where they've become more senior in their role. And that has been a kind of hard journey for them. And they've reached this senior level within their role, and then they are experiencing these symptoms, which can really impact confidence. So I certainly, like women that I have worked with, I have one woman and she was 43, experiencing quite significant kind of symptoms of the perimenopause, and she had very young children, but she was also caring for her elderly parents. So there's a lot going on within this time in a woman's life. Again, we said that menopausal women are the fastest growing demographic within the workplace. Now, what I wanted to do next, again, just very, very briefly, was to give you a little bit of an idea of what is going on during this period before we move on to look at what you can kind of do to support women in the workplace. So this graph here will give you a very rough idea of the normal, the chemicals in relation to a woman's normal cycle. And when I say normal cycle, this is the period of time where they're having regularly monthly cycles, okay? So estrogen, as you can see, so this is over like 4 weeks, okay? So estrogen rises in the first 2 weeks, and then after ovulation, it starts to take a dip, and then it's lowest just before a woman is about to have her monthly cycle, okay? Now, the interesting thing about estrogen is that every single cell in the human body and brain has estrogen receptors, and estrogen is a really, really key hormone, okay? And it is for so many processes within the body. Estrogen is in part responsible for generating serotonin. And serotonin is the chemical within our bodies and brains that makes us feel safe, secure, content, just generally supports our mental health. When serotonin is low, we are more likely to experience anxiety or depression. So this is, as you can see, just for a woman going through what we might call just a normal cycle, kind of the first 2 weeks, she's going to have a bit more energy. And then the second 2 weeks, that kind of dips a bit and, until she kind of moves towards starting her period. So the second key chemical here is the chemical progesterone. And as you can see, progesterone is kind of higher in the second 2 weeks, but then it begins to kind of take a dip before a woman gets to her period. And progesterone is an interesting chemical, obviously essential for reproduction, but progesterone is a bit like an anti-anxiety chemical. So when that begins to take a dip before a woman's period, that's when they start getting some of the symptoms of premenstrual tension, and that's in a normal cycle. You can also see, which is quite interesting here, that women also have a tiny amount of testosterone, and testosterone takes more of a dip around ovulation. And testosterone is key in supporting kind of brain clarity and confidence and also libido. So those are, you can see that women also have a certain level of testosterone as well. So let's have a look at what happens, these chemicals, particularly estrogen and progesterone, as women move through the premenopause, perimenopause and menopausal periods. So firstly, as you can see, so let me explain this kind of graph. And again, this is just to give you a representation. It's not highly scientific. But if you can imagine that in the premenopause period, which is where a woman has a normal monthly cycle, the progesterone is quite high. Perimenopause, it starts to take a dip, and menopause, it's low. So after official menopause, progesterone is low, okay? And then estrogen is more interesting in the way that it works, okay? So estrogen is high in the premenopause, even though, as you can see, over a 4-week period, it takes kind of peaks and troughs. During perimenopause, estrogen starts to do something quite interesting, where there'll be periods where estrogen is higher, then it takes a dip, then it goes high again, then it takes a dip, then it kind of increases again, but maybe not quite as much, takes a dip. So perimenopause can be a very fluctuating time in a woman's life. So again, we're looking at kind of, mid-40s up to the kind of menopause period. And then post-menopause, estrogen is quite low. Now, one of the, interesting facts is that if we go back about 100 years, average life expectancy for a woman was the kind of mid-50s. Now, average life expectancy is into the 80s. So women now will be living kind of 30 more years post-menopause. And it is really, really important then that they are supported in relation to kind of their health and well-being during those times, and also to support it to continue working for as long as they want to continue working. But when progesterone and estrogen levels go lower, there's a range of kind of physical and psychological symptoms. And certainly a lower level of estrogen in particular has been linked to a higher risk of osteoporosis, cardiovascular disease, and some forms of dementia. So again, when women's life expectancy was much lower, that wouldn't have been as apparent. Now women are living for at least another 30 years, and I would imagine as we're going forward, much longer than that. So then it is really important to kind of ask the question, is there ways that these two key chemicals can actually be enhanced to support women's longer term health so that they have what we want, which is longevity. We want healthier years for longer for women. Okay, so it really links into some of the areas that we've looked at in this range of workshops around positive aging as well. So just very quickly, the four main symptoms, or the main symptoms of the menopause, fall under four main categories. So you've got psychological, vasomotor, somatic, and genitourinary symptoms. Okay, and I'm just very quickly going to touch on these because I think it's really, really important to kind of give a little bit of an overview so we understand where we're coming from. So the psychological symptoms in relation to cognition. So what we're talking about there is, difficulty concentrating, memory lapses, at times having periods where you're feeling a little bit confused, a bit of brain fog. And then we're moving into kind of some more of the anxiety symptoms where we're looking at just a kind of general feeling of anxiety. So again, this is because of two main factors: lower levels of progesterone, which is like an anti-anxiety hormone, and also lower levels of estrogen, which has an impact on your levels of serotonin. Okay, so those two main areas. So women will report feeling just this kind of elevated feelings of unease, of tension, of worry, just feeling a bit more agitated, more easily irritated, maybe an increase in what we would call rumination, which is kind of going over and over negative thoughts about a situation. Then, some women will describe quite intrusive thoughts, feeling a little bit more risk averse. So not what I know of people who have come to some of the workshops who've talked about, start to feel quite anxious about driving or driving at night. Physical symptoms of anxiety in relation to an elevated heart rate. And then kind of, if they are experiencing some symptoms around depression, that can be just feeling kind of flat, kind of, women saying things like, it's been a long time since I really laughed about something, or I'm neither feeling high or low. I'm not feeling anything at the moment. A lack of motivation or kind of pleasure. Sometimes that can be a lack of appetite, tearful. And then at times actually, more in relation to the anxiety, kind of headaches and chronic pain. So again, that, if you can imagine that even if you were experiencing one or two of those symptoms, that could really have an impact on your kind of overall ability to carry out your job and also your confidence. Now, when women were going through this by themselves, what are they going to do? They're going to blame themselves. They're saying, I'm not good enough, I'm not focused enough, I'm not working hard enough, I'm not dealing with stress well enough, rather than understanding these are natural kind of symptoms of the menopause and they're not permanent. And I think that's one of the key things. There's an excellent TED Talk, which I will send a link for, and it's by an American neurologist, and she's talking about the link between menopause and dementia. But what she said very clearly is these aren't permanent symptoms, that they do die down after the menopause, and actually many women go on to do their best work post-menopause. So it's actually, really important that we support women during this time so that we can retain them within the workplace. Okay, so the next kind of symptoms are the vasomotor symptoms. So estrogen is key for regulating body temperature. So women will experience night sweats, hot flushes, just an increase in perspiration. So what some women will say, you know, I actually literally have to bring a change of clothes with me into work. And I never knew when it was going to hit me, but I'd have to go and like change my top because I would have this kind of increase in perspiration. And it was the kind of unpredictable nature of it, which became quite stressful. But as you can see here, these symptoms potentially lead to sleep disruption. So the psychological symptoms can have a real impact on sleep, these symptoms as well. Now, anyone who has kind of really kind of looked at their well-being or supported employees with well-being will know that of all the pillars of well-being, sleep is the most important because so many things go on in the body and the brain during sleep and emotionally. So, you know, our blood pressure is lowered, our heart rate is regulated, inflammation is lowered, cells are repaired, toxin within the brain are removed, emotional arousal from the day is regulated, cortisol levels are brought down, if you can have memories are embedded, and learning is advanced if you get a good night's sleep. If you don't get a good night's sleep, then none of those things are happening properly. So you may have a woman in your workplace and she's just literally struggling with the sleep. And so when she comes in the next day, everything is more difficult. Things are more stressful because you haven't had a good night's sleep. Anyone who's kind of gone through a period with a young baby will know that's the case as well. So, but I think there's probably less understanding if you're going through the menopause because women maybe don't want to talk about that openly. Somatic symptoms can be women are experiencing kind of dizziness or faintness, maybe kind of feeling that it might be an inner ear issue, pressure or tightness in the head. Tinnitus can be something, and that can that a number of women can experience, and that can be really, really difficult and stressful. Just this kind of ringing noise in the ears. Headaches, and some women who may have experienced hormone-related migraines, this can really increase during this period of time. Joint or muscle pain, because estrogen is like a lubricant in the body, and with, you know, so it lubricates the joints as well. And for some women, breathing difficulties. And then the genitourinary symptoms. And for example, a lot of women might experience what they believe to be a UTI, but it's actually in relation to the menopause. So it might be treated with antibiotics, but that's the wrong approach. So again, this is where knowledge is power. Now, what do we know about which of those symptoms impact women most within the workplace? Okay, so we know number one, this is from surveys of thousands of women, they'll say it's the hot flushes because of the unpredictable nature of it and the fact that it just can happen at any time. And a lot of women will say, you know, I was right in the middle of a meeting, I was presenting, and all of a sudden I got a hot flush, and it really, I found it really embarrassing. It kind of put me off my train of thought. So that can be particularly difficult and uncomfortable. Number two, the sleep disruption and fatigue, which fatigue's very different from tiredness. Fatigue is this kind of, you know, just this overall feeling of a complete lack of energy, which impacts motivation as well. And then the third most reported symptoms are the brain fog or poor memory, where you're having that kind of discussion with someone and all of a sudden you forget some of the key points that you were about to say. Now, and the last one obviously being just general anxiety and depression. Okay, so what we know from surveys is that 1 in 4 women experiencing these to really quite a significant level, but many women are embarrassed to talk about it within the workplace. Okay, so that's where creating a culture where everyone knows what these symptoms are, everybody understands the impact that they have, and that there is a culture where it's okay to talk about these without feeling that you might experience you know, stigma is really, really important, because there can be some really easy adjustments made to work and practices that can alleviate some of these symptoms, you know. So, and we don't want women suffering in silence because there is a real impact on work. And we'll just have a wee look at what some of those are. Okay, so what we know is 81% of women say that menopause affects their performance at work for all of the reasons we've already looked at. 87% state that their line manager would benefit from menopause training. 1 in 3 of the workforce will soon be over 50, and retirement ages average now are moving, later into the 60s. So, we really do need to support women going through at this time. And I know some people have already done these kind of training workshops with managers, and I think that's really important, because if a woman is going to speak to her manager, whatever gender the manager is, they don't want to have to be, educate the manager to start off with. They want to be on the same page from the start, so that the manager understands that they need to take this seriously. It's not just something that women will have to just put up with. What we know as well is that there've already been successful employment tribunals against employers. Now, those are ones in which women have clearly expressed that they've been struggling with symptoms of the menopause, and that they haven't got the support, or indeed that a woman has experienced a demotion in role because of performance, which they have clearly said, but this is because I'm going through these symptoms of the menopause. Okay, so that's not to frighten people, but that's where this menopause policy is so important, and also educating line managers and HR departments as to how to deal with it effectively. Nearly 25% of women had time off work over the period of going through the menopause. So we've got a kind of issue around loss of productivity. And 50% of women said that work made the symptoms worse. Now, why is that the case? Because, when your levels of estrogen are low, you're producing less serotonin, and you're more likely to feel kind of a bit more depressed. One of the other chemicals that depletes estrogen is cortisol. So cortisol is the stress chemical, that anxiety chemical, where we feel that the work that we're trying to get done is either too much or too complex or too complicated, or maybe there's a lot of office politics going on. Those kind of things will elevate our cortisol levels. And when our cortisol levels are high, it depletes what estrogen we have. So stress makes the symptoms of the menopause worse. So as you can see, there's kind of overlapping, your health and well-being strategy will also kind of relate to your menopause strategy. And one of the last kind of statistics, 25% of women said that felt that they weren't capable of doing their current role. And so we know that there was a poll in 2022 of 2,000 women. And they revealed 18% of them were looking to leave their jobs because of menopause symptom. So that equates to about 1 million women within the UK workforce. Okay, and the most common reason for leaving was reported to be just the pressures put on them in addition to going through the symptoms. Okay, and the second most common reason was a failure to receive flexible working environment required to manage menopausal symptoms, and just a lack of understanding from their management. So we know that women at this really pivotal point in their careers, potentially a proportion of them, 18%, which is, nearly a fifth of women, might actually say no to a promotion, want to reduce their hours, or want to kind of have either a sidestep or a demotion because of menopause symptoms. So that's a huge loss, not only for the women themselves, but also the organisation. Okay, so this is quite a nice, again, infographic come from Business in the Community. So just to kind of get that message across, there's huge information out there in terms of from the Business in the Community website. I'm also going to give you a slide at the end that has some other links as well. But I think that this thinking in particular to the impact of women with disabilities, the impact, just if you are having to make the business case in relation to actually providing support around the menopause for women, you can look at what the kind of loss of productivity will have, particularly if women have to take time off sick. Okay, so there's lots of statistics out there as well. I think it's quite interesting to look at the economic consequences for women. are disadvantaging women in the workplace. So these are, I mean, these figures, they're not hugely up to date from 2016 and 17. But what they were able to show was that the gender pay gap is largest between 50 and 64. Okay. And it was 39%, okay, in terms of the pension gap. This was quite an interesting study done by Oxford Economics, where they estimated the cost to an employer to replace a woman who leaves is approximately £30,000. Okay, so in terms of recruitment, training someone new, loss of productivity, expertise, and burden on colleagues, I would kind of go further with that. And I would say that what you're losing is a level of experience and maturity within teams that's very hard to replace. Because once any employee gets to a certain point in their career and a certain level of kind of experience, they, if they're good at their job, they will have a really, really stabilizing impact on, particularly if they're in a management role, on the team that they're managing, where they will hold together a team. And because they've had so much experience, it's a level of resilience that actually can lead to a high performing team where they will have dealt with most problems and they will know that most things work out in the end. So it's this emotional maturity as well, I think, that we're losing. In terms of specifically the business case, it's about retaining older workers with knowledge and experience. It's reducing the cost of staff turnover and attracting new talent from all age groups. So I know I've been doing a lot of work with companies at the moment in relation to kind of positive aging, but also in relation to recruitment, and saying, like, we're not just recruiting from the younger demographic. You may be recruiting from the kind of 45-year plus and wanting to bring that expertise and maturity into your workplace. So having that clear menopause policy is going to be very attractive to people coming into your workplace. And then obviously in relation to health and safety legislation and Equality Act, so duty not to discriminate against employees on grounds of gender or disability, and also looking at age as well. So how can we practically support women within the workplace and build a culture within which, women going through the menopause really feel kind of included and supported? So we're going to look at some kind of key areas. So looking at starting off with the policy or the framework. Okay, so even if it is that it is, a kind of outline policy, having a policy sends a clear message to everyone within an organisation. We take this seriously. We value everyone within our organisation, and we want to support women going through this process. Then looking, and I'm going to look in these in a little bit more detail as well. So then looking at education for all. So the power in actually just educating everyone on what the menopause is, how long it lasts for, what the symptoms are, and what some of the solutions are in relation to the menopause. So I'm not really kind of going to go into those solutions in this workshop in particular, but the solutions come under three main headings. Okay, so solutions being number one, lifestyle solutions. So actually supporting women to kind of put the habits in place to get a good night's sleep, to look at their diet, to get a level of exercise in, including some strength-based exercise, which can support kind of to increase levels of testosterone, which is really important. Women need to continue to build muscle as they get older. That can be one of the key ways to supporting them with the symptoms of the menopause. Also looking at stress. And also ensuring that women aren't isolated. So those are the kind of lifestyle, being able to support women to look at those essential habits, small habits done consistently on a daily basis that will make a real big difference to symptoms. Okay, so that's number one. Okay, number two, there are a range of kind of non-medical interventions out there in relation to relaxation, using different supplements. So key supplements, like for example, ensuring that women have enough vitamin D, vitamin A, the B vitamins, which are really, really important for producing and regulating hormones, and looking at supplements such as magnesium, which plays a huge role in keeping the nervous system healthy and supporting with sleep. So those are kind of, there's lots of kind of supplements and herbs that can be used to support women with the symptoms. And then there's also HRT, which has come a huge way over the years in relation to, number one, the way in which HRT is now administered and actually manufactured. So, which has significantly decreased the risk of HRT, and also awareness around HRT, because I'm sure people who've attended menopause workshops before will know that those initial alarming studies that came out in the 90s around the risks around HRT were very flawed. Number one, they were carried out with women who were in their late 50s, early 60s. So women had already gone through the menopause, but who themselves were at higher risk of cardiovascular disease and cancer. So the results of them were skewed. Number two, the type of HRT at that point was a combined HRT, which was a synthetic HRT that was taken orally. Whereas now HRT is given separately. So you've estrogen is given separately, and it is derived from natural sources. And it's also not mostly commonly taken orally, so it means that it does not get processed through the liver. So it's often in a gel or a patch that is put on in the lower part of the body, and it is released in tiny amounts, which has a very, very low risk to women. And then progesterone is given separately as a separate medication. And you know, GPs and consultants know so much more now about how to identify women who are at higher risk of certain types of cancer, so that they can, you know, be very sophisticated about the types of HRT they give them, and also to identify the types of symptoms, patterns, and what mix of HRT is going to work best for them. And what we also know now is that actually the research is kind of turning to say that HRT should be given earlier and as a preventative measure for some of the clear risks in relation to low levels of estrogen and progesterone, specifically cardiovascular disease, osteoporosis and dementia. So educating around solutions can be really, really key. The next bit is upskilling managers to be able to have those conversations, not be worried about having those conversations, and being able to kind of to know what support the organisation provides, and also to know what impact do these symptoms have on performance, and how can I actually sit down with this member of the team and just have a really compassionate but also productive conversation about how things could be rearranged for them so that they could continue to feel happy and healthy in work, and also continue to play that really important role that they have in the team. Okay. And that leads on to the reasonable adjustments. So what reasonable adjustments can be made in the workplace, and I'll come to those in a minute, that can support women, because sometimes it can be something just really small can make a really big difference. And then looking at the access to support. So it may be, so if we imagined, and I really actually should have done this like a pyramid, but if you can imagine that's the tip of our pyramid at the top for women who are experiencing significant symptoms, what type of actual supports are out there for them? And that might be just being freed up to go to your GP. It may be some of the great ideas organisations have had, like menopause support groups, menopause cafes, you know, specific programs, that group work that women are involved in relation to the menopause. Lots of ways that they can, some organisations in terms of access and support will have either private health care, or will bring in occupational health or medical practitioners who are experts to kind of support women to kind of look at their health and well-being. Some organisations have also given women kind of, you know, vouchers towards going to see functional medical practitioners who kind of take a very holistic approach to people's health, and that can be really supportive too. And then this bit about commitment. Commitment from the top level from an organisation is really, really important. So it's a bit, you know, if you are doing a menopause awareness workshop, going to some of these key senior managers and saying, look, we're running this workshop. It's menopause awareness for all, or it's menopause training for managers. It's really, really important that someone within the senior management team also comes along, because that gives a really clear message. We're taking this seriously. It's not just a tick box exercise. Now, I just wanted to run through very quickly what some of the things that you might put into your menopause policy. For the people who already have these, then hopefully you will be kind of thinking, tick, we've got all of these things covered, or you might actually identify things that you've got in your policy that I haven't got down here, which would be really good to hear that as well. But kind of key things that it's important to remember. Okay, so you want to start off with an introduction and the purpose, like why are we writing this policy? Because we as an organisation value all our employees and the health and well-being and contribution of all our employees, and we want to support them. So that their kind of clear mission statement. The scope, who does this policy apply to? The education and the awareness bit, so providing a bit of information on the symptoms and their impact on people at work. There's great resources out there. Number one being business in the community. They've absolutely fantastic resources out there around statistics and just very clearly identifying the symptoms. So that's I think just being able to put that in so that people understand, like, what is menopause and perimenopause and how does that impact people at work. And just before I forget, actually, this has just occurred to me that I think it's important in this as well to bear in mind the small but significant proportion of women younger women who experience a condition called insufficient ovarian deficiency. So that you may have women in their kind of late teens, early 20s who actually have a medical condition where they're very, very low levels of estrogen and progesterone, and they may be going through some of these very similar menopause symptoms as well. So I think it's that kind of, if that's included in your awareness raising workshops, I think it's really important. It may only be one or two women within the organization, but it's really important for managers to know this, because you may have someone within your team and they're not only struggling with these symptoms, but they're struggling with the psychological impact around potentially their fertility. So, all of these things, it's good. Knowledge is power. It's good to know these things. So other things that you might want to put into your policy is around flexible working. What options are there? What's the process to request flexible working? Again, this can make a really, really big difference. We're now in a much different place than we were 3 years ago, where most organizations offer a level of hybrid working. And I think that can make a big difference, because if women are working, at least some of the time within their own homes, they can be doing things like, regulating their environment, the temperature of their room. They can be ensuring that they're having breaks. They may, if they've had a really bad night's sleep, they may take half an hour out to kind of have a rest and then maybe work slightly later. So there's lots of different ways that can be incredibly helpful. When people are going through symptoms like this, any way that you can raise their feelings of control will bring down their feelings of stress. Like, that's just general work-related stress. So control, an enhanced sense of control and choice, brings down feelings of stress. So, that's just as relevant with the menopause. So in relation to kind of health and well-being support, detailed support is available through the company, and signposts to organisations such as Menopause UK, the British Menopause Society, NHS. Most organisations would have, I would imagine, have like a wellbeing hub or pages within their intranet. So even just ensuring that those are kept up to date and have really good links to them, and then a process of just a PR process of kind of regularly getting that information out there. Please visit our wellbeing page to find out more, to find out useful links, books, podcasts, support groups. There's so much out there, and again, for many women, just having those links and knowing what to do next can make the world of difference. Communication channels, so making it really clear in your policy what the channels are for employees to discuss how it's impacting them. So it may be that the first protocol is to go to your line manager, but it may be that actually it's straight to the HR team, or the health and well-being coordinator. It may be that if you have a menopause working group, that actually they have a bit of a drop-in kind of clinic going on. So, just make that kind of clear within the policy. Emphasize the need within the policy. I think it's important to put that in for that it is the responsibility of the managers to ensure they're educated. You could detail in this any adjustments to work, any reasonable adjustments that you could that are available. Or even just to say, please discuss this with your line manager. Managers, please be aware about the need to make reasonable adjustments. Look at leave policy, because again, this might be something that for women makes a big difference, that they could temporarily have some special leave, or that they may temporarily reduce hours, because what we really want to avoid is that women either leave posts, step down, or reduce hours if it's not the right thing for them. For some women that might be, but if it's not right, if they feel that they've no other choice because of the symptoms of the menopause, even if it is something that they do temporarily, if there's the opportunity for them then when things are better to increase hours, that can be really key. And then emphasising a commitment to a workplace free from discrimination with regards to gender, mental health, age and disability. And the last bit, to put in just a process for resolving conflict and recording the process. Again, you're always kind of thinking worst case scenario. But if, for example, it's not managed well, that can really snowball. And that's where you don't want that to end up either. So just in relation to creating inclusive cultures, okay? So again, this is kind of, we're reinforcing some of the things we're already saying, okay? But what is a culture? A culture is what it feels like psychologically to work in an organization. A culture is the things that are done regularly and the very clear messages that employees get about how they're valued. And so this is really key in supporting, building a positive culture. And I think not just for women going through the menopause, but also for people of all ages to know that no matter what you're experiencing in life, you will be supported as appropriate within your workplace because you're valued, and we want to retain people and grow people. So again, you know, not that we would like to think that women will experience negative attitudes within the workplace, but I still think that it is very early days in changing hearts and minds around the menopause. And that's a process that we need to do so that women feel okay about saying, yes, I'm going through symptoms of the menopause, but that does not mean that I'm not a hard worker, that I'm not intelligent, that I'm not able to be productive. It's just that this is difficult right now. So it's this bit about, avoiding stigma within the workplace. So we've talked about this as well. I think there's a kind of job to be done in reframing the menopause, that it's, again, a lot of women that I've worked with, they'll say, like, I was absolutely terrified about approaching the menopause. It to me signified a period of just difficulty and loss. I no longer felt like I was as much of a woman as I had previously. I no longer felt I was relevant or useful within society. And I think that we're still in that process of reframing the menopause as being a really, really important transition in a woman's life, where there are actually other benefits in terms of reaching that level kind of experience and maturity and emotional intelligence and insight, and actually kind of support within communities that actually is really invaluable. Someone once said, you spend the first part of your life thinking about how you can make other people happy and trying to work out other people. You spend the second part of your life thinking about your inner world and what you need and what makes a meaningful life for you. And I think this comes into play as well within the menopause. Okay, so we've already kind of talked about this, upskilling managers, I think, is really key. Even just for someone within the team to know that their manager knows that the menopause is a tricky period can go a long way. So also obviously for managers to be really, really kind of clear about the policy that's around, and to kind of so approach women with empathy. Again, it sounds so simple, it sounds like it goes without saying, but again, it goes a long way to finding solutions together where a woman will feel much more supported and more able to retain be retained within, the role that she is in at that point, and being able to signpost women to support. Now, just wanted to kind of go through some of the reasonable environmental and physical adjustments that could be made. Not always possible in all workplaces, but these are some of the ideas. You might have other ideas, but things like just fans and ventilation, again, a small thing, but it can make a big difference. Temperature control, having the kind of toilet facilities, changing facilities, women-only showers. Uniforms, again, so when people are working, I've done quite a lot of work within the NHS, obviously, huge kind of in terms of gender proportions, really a female kind of, the majority of the employees of the NHS are women, and also now within this older demographic. So in terms of kind of uniforms being designed with more natural materials rather than synthetic materials. Rest areas, again, natural light. So in terms of this risk of kind of the headaches and changes in eyesight around this period as well is impacted by the reduction in hormones. Quiet areas to work and reduction in noise exposure. What we know anyway is that open plan offices are not good for productivity. They're lovely for building connection with colleagues, but if we want to get work done, you need to have quiet areas that you can go to just to concentrate. I suppose one of the other bits I wanted to kind of just look at is I think this flexible working can have a really big impact in relation to, supporting women to retain in their roles, because a little bit of flexibility can go a long way. And it may only be a temporary, solution, but it can make a really, really big difference. And again, just enhances those feelings of control. I don't think that's an issue for most workplaces now. I mean, obviously, if it is a role where you have to physically be in the building because you're client facing, then that's a little bit more difficult. But certainly, organisations are being more and more creative around this and finding that there isn't a reduction in productivity. In some areas, there's actually an increase in productivity. So I just wanted to just put on it again, just in terms of the links. Anyone who's kind of been to any workshops on the menopause previously will probably have come across most of these. The one that I would really highlight is Dr. Louise Newsom, and her app called the Balance app is one particularly good in relation to kind of supporting women to really kind of gain this knowledge, not only around the symptoms of the menopause, but actually to know about themselves. So one of the key challenges for women going through the menopause is that it's really hard to gain a clear picture of what your symptoms are and how they're impacting you, okay? And the reason why that is so important is that if a woman decides that they want to go and have that conversation with their GP, that the more prepared they are for that appointment, the better. So the Balance app is a great app because it helps women track their symptoms over months and sometimes over years, where they can see the patterns. And once you begin to see the pattern, that can be really, really helpful to see what type of interventions will work best. Okay, again, knowledge is power. And the Balance app is based on a thing called the Green Climacteric scale. Now, this is a global scale that is used. It's like a questionnaire. You can download it off the internet, where you can actually just tick symptoms and how frequently you get them. And that scale is what is used by most GPs to kind of determine whether women are at the point where HRT might be an option for them, or other interventions, or B, whether they need to be referred on to a particular, a specific menopause consultant. There are only 2 menopause consultants in Northern Ireland, and there is a menopause clinic within the Mater Hospital in Belfast, and GPs can refer to that clinic. It's quite rare for women. You'd have to have very significant symptoms for it to be referred to that clinic. However, what is really good to know is that the consultants within that team within the Mater are also available for GPs to email queries to, and they will respond. So it means that, and all of this is knowledge is power. If you can tell women within your workplace, look, if you go to see your GP, keep a track of your symptoms and actually say, ask to see a GP that is a women's health specialist, and then ask if they can refer or access support from a specific menopause consultant. That can be really, really helpful as well. So again, all these things kind of build up a picture. And that again is if you have, I'm going to come out of the slides here, guys, but if you have a menopause working group, that can be one of the areas that they can be really, really helpful in. It's just getting these messages out there. Natalie, is it okay if we just turn the recording off, if that's okay?
Yes, I will do that now. Just bear with me. Where did I do this?
Is it up in the 3 little dots? You see it, the more action?
Record. Stop recording.
Okay.
There we go.